What if stories and legends could offer us the key to the hottest political issues of the day? What if all the answers to today's burning questions were presented in easy-to-digest narratives and myths? Join us as we examine some of the most fascinating tales, some mythological, some historical, and apply those lessons to the chaos of modern politics. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. Welcome to The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, a LibertyNation.com production. With New Year here, we often begin discussing the need for changes, for personal reform, usually taking the style of a list of resolutions. As William Cullen Bryant, the poet and longtime editor of the New York Evening Post, wrote in the 19th century, quote, "And suns grow meek, and the meek suns grow brief, and the year smiles as it draws near its death." End quote. We see the end of the year as a small death that brings about new life, filled with prospects and opportunities for both adventure and personal growth. But as we're all aware, each second of every single day is a moment in which we can effect positive change in ourselves and the world around us. So is it the symbolism of the January the 1st that gives us that extra impetus? But what if January the 1st was really just an arbitrarily picked day? What if throughout history and throughout the world even today, New Year's Day as we know it was an ever-changing moment? Would that change how we view this new start to life, this one more second chance? You see, regarding the 1st of January as the first day of the new year is a somewhat recent occurrence, and one that has not spread much farther than the West. In China, for example, the new year is tied directly to the lunar calendar, and so in 2020 falls on January 25th. But this date varies year by year to coincide with the cycles of the moon. Across Asia, this is regarded as the biggest annual holiday. Sometimes it falls in February, sometimes in January. This is not to say that Chinese folks don't celebrate January 1st, but they don't consider it the real celebration. The Iranian New Year, or Persian New Year, known as Nowruz, has been celebrated for over 3,000 years and falls on or around March 21st, at the precise moment the sun crosses the celestial equator. In ancient Babylonia, around 3000 BC, there was a festival called Akitu. It fell in late March, which is the first new moon after the vernal equinox, and was regarded as the turning of a new year. That tradition carried on through the ages, becoming known on the Jewish calendar as Nisan, which is named for the month it falls in. But this celebration was far more than just a time to drink a glass of cheer. It was an 11-day festival that could be used to either herald in a new king or to allow the continued rule of the existing king. It was a major party that would likely put even the most fun-fueled New Year's Eve parties of today to shame. The roots of that celebration, though, lay even further back, in the tale of the sky god Marduk and his victory over the sea goddess Tiamat. Tiamat herself is a really interesting character. She represents primordial chaos, the swirling seas, danger. Her legend goes like this. With her husband, Apsu, she creates children, not ordinary babes in arms, but deities. Apsu, correctly as it turns out, suspects that these children will one day try to usurp his place, his throne, so he starts waging war against them. He gets killed in the ensuing battles, which angers Tiamat so much that she joins in the battles against her own children. She turns herself into a giant sea serpent or dragon, and for her armies, she creates a range of monsters and beasts, including the world's first dragons, whose blood was not normal blood, but poison. She is eventually killed by Marduk, and in a grisly scene from the Babylonian creation epic in Numa Elish, she ends her reign. It goes like this, quote, "And the Lord stood upon Tiamat's hinder parts, and with his merciless club he smashed her skull. He cut through the channels of her blood, and he made the north wind bear it away into secret places." End quote. Gruesome stuff, eh? Now Marduk, he used her ribs to create the vault of heaven. Her tearful eyes became the source of the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, and her tail becomes the Milky Way. And Marduk himself, he becomes king of all the deities. So this festival of New Year represents two things. First, the assumption of power, which is why the new king was chosen or the existing king permitted to rule another year. But secondly, it represents the destruction of chaos and disorder. And this ties in so well with our modern view of New Year. It's a time to put aside the last year, the history, and focus on the more stable future. We consign the chaos of the past to the wind and begin again in a new rule. Clearly, the New Year that is celebrated by the West is based on something other than just old myths or lunar and solar cycles. But even this date, that we all acknowledge has a rocky ride to prominence, wasn't in fact until 1750, when the British Empire decided to adopt the Gregorian calendar, that's when things really started to solidify. Prior to this, like much of Europe, especially Protestant countries, Britain used the Julian calendar, designed and implemented by Julius Caesar himself. But like the great man, also had a few inherent problems. Namely, an unaccounted for drift that meant for over the period of almost 2,000 years, the calendar had lost 11 days. In rather typical British fashion, Parliament decided that those missing days would literally just be disappeared upon the adoption of the new calendar. It was announced that Wednesday, September 2nd, would be followed directly by Thursday, September 14th, 1752, thus settling the empire onto a calendar that would not be allowed to lose more time, thanks to February 29th. But what of those missing 11 days? Well, there are a few interesting stories that go along with that. There are the so-called English calendar riots, in which angry mobs formed to demand who was going to pay for their extra 11 days' rent, or why they were still to be charged a full year's tax, even though they would not be getting a full year's recompense. Political satirists and cartoonists of the time had much fun at the expense of the Tories over the Whigs, as political strife pitted one group against the other. Whether the stories of the calendar riots are true or not is sadly unknown. Certainly the papers of the day made much of the term, but very few people provide an actual account of the riots taking place. The Historic UK website, saying most historians now believe that these protests never happened, and that the calendar rioters were the late Georgian equivalent of an urban myth. But why has January 1st been adopted as the turning of the year? Well, perhaps unsurprisingly, this is to do with religion. The 1st of January is the day of Jesus' circumcision, 7 days after his birth. As we discussed in an earlier edition of The Rabbit Hole, the idea of the 25th of December being Jesus' actual birthday is not really on solid ground. But likewise, many other holy days have been regarded as the beginning of a new year. In some areas it was celebrated on March 25th, Lady Day, which memorializes the Virgin Mary and the Feast of the Annunciation. It has also been deemed to be both Christmas Day and Easter Day, each with their own unique reasons. The reality is that it doesn't really matter what date the true New Year falls on, and it doesn't matter what it says on our calendars. It's all subjective, it's all perspective, and this provides us with a valuable lesson. We need not wait for the months, weeks, and days to fall away. We can renew, we can claim order from chaos at any time we wish. We can be both the heralds and the heroes of our own destinies. And we need not wait for an arbitrary date to start. Let's just remember a far more recent piece of advice and go forward into the new year. There's no time like the present. Thank you for listening to The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, a LibertyNation.com production. Join us next episode, where we'll be talking more history, politics, legends and stories. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Liberty Nation Gen Z is your portal for engaging articles without the spin, riveting videos that foster critical thinking, downloadable worksheets and quizzes for each age level. Liberty Nation Gen Z. A free thinking future starts here.